She stole my future. Today, I'm taking hers.
The kitchen clock read 2:47 a.m. when I found Lila's suitcase sprawled open on our bed like a crime scene waiting to be photographed. Inside, nestled between her usual corporate armor of blazers and pencil skirts, were things that made my whole body run cold. Black lace lingerie I'd never seen before, a red dress that screamed "take me" in every language, and perfume that wasn't the vanilla stuff she'd worn for our entire 10-year marriage. My name is Evan Rourke, and I used to think I knew my wife. Couldn't sleep again? Lila's voice cut through the darkness as she appeared in the doorway, her silhouette sharp against the hallway light. Even at nearly 3 in the morning, she looked put together in a way that had once impressed me and now just felt calculated. Your emergency work trip wardrobe is interesting, I said, nodding toward the suitcase. Since when does HR strategy require Victoria's Secret? She laughed, but it was the kind of laugh that could freeze whiskey. God, Evan, you're so paranoid lately. It's just clothes. Clothes you've never worn around me. Maybe because you never take me anywhere worth dressing up for anymore. She moved to the suitcase and started folding items with sharp, angry movements. When's the last time we went somewhere nice? When's the last time you even looked at me like you wanted me? I wanted to point out that it's hard to want someone who treats you like a roommate she barely tolerates. But I'd learned that logic and Lila mixed about as well as gasoline and matches. Instead, I watched her pack, noting how she handled that red dress like it was made of gold. Where exactly are you going again? I asked. Portland. The merger consultation with Danielle's team. Danielle was Lila's older sister and the head of HR at TechFlow Industries, where Lila worked as a director. The two of them together were like a corporate tag team from nightmare territory. Beautiful, smart, and absolutely ruthless when it came to getting what they wanted. Right, Portland, I nodded slowly. And you'll be staying at the Westin downtown. Evan, what is this? 20 questions at 3 in the morning? Her phone buzzed on the nightstand. She grabbed it faster than a quick-draw artist, and I caught a glimpse of the name on the screen. Brandon. Work emergency, she said, not looking at me, as she typed a response. Brandon Cross. I knew the name from Lila's office stories. Some hotshot strategic consultant who'd joined TechFlow 6 months ago, ex-college football player, drove a BMW, and had the kind of confidence that came from never being told no by anyone who mattered. The kind of guy who probably called women sweetheart and thought it was charming. At 3 a.m., I asked? Corporate world doesn't sleep, Evan. You'd know that if you still had a real job. That stung, and she knew it. I'd been laid off from my technical manager position at Morrison Industries 3 months ago, and despite sending out dozens of resumes, the market was brutal. Lila had been supportive at first, but lately, every conversation felt like a performance review where I was failing. I'm trying, Lila. You know I'm trying. Are you? Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you're spending a lot of time at Marty's gym and not much time actually looking for work. Marty's boxing club was my sanctuary, a place where problems could be solved with sweat and the satisfying thud of gloves against heavy bags. Marty himself was an old army buddy who'd transitioned from military police to private investigation, and the gym was his cover for a thriving business, helping people find things they'd lost, or things other people didn't want found. Exercise helps me think, I said. Maybe think a little harder. She zipped the suitcase shut with finality. I'm leaving at 6. Don't wait up. She brushed past me toward the bathroom, and I caught a whiff of that new perfume again, something expensive and sultry that definitely wasn't vanilla. As the bathroom door closed, I heard her phone buzz again, followed by the soft sound of her voice talking to someone. I couldn't make out the words, but I didn't need to. The tone told me everything. Warm, flirtatious, the way she used to talk to me back when we were dating, and she actually seemed to like having me around. Sleep was impossible after that. I made coffee and sat in my basement workshop, surrounded by the half-finished projects that had once been my hobby and were now just reminders of all the things I started but couldn't seem to complete. My laptop sat open on the workbench, its screen showing my email inbox. 17 new rejections from potential employers, each one a polite variation of thanks but no thanks. At 6:15 a.m., I heard Lila's car pull out of the driveway. She hadn't said goodbye. By 7:30, I was dressed and ready to face another day of job hunting and pretending my marriage wasn't falling apart. That's when my phone rang. Evan Rourke. The voice was crisp, professional, unfamiliar. Speaking. This is Janet Morrison from Morrison Industries HR. I'm calling to inform you that due to a recent policy review, your severance package has been canceled, effective immediately. You'll need to return your company laptop and any other materials by end of business today. The words hit me like a punch to the solar plexus. I'm sorry, what? My severance was already approved and processed. There was an error in the initial calculation. Your position was eliminated during what our records show as a vacation period, which, according to company policy, nullifies severance eligibility. That's impossible. I was laid off on a Tuesday. I hadn't taken vacation in 6 months. Our records show you were on approved vacation leave starting the Monday before your termination. I'm sorry, Mr. Rourke, but the decision is final. The line went dead, leaving me staring at my phone like it had just grown fangs. Vacation leave. I'd never requested vacation leave, but I knew exactly who had access to employee records and the authority to make changes retroactively. Danielle. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Hope you enjoyed your vacation. A friend. I stared at that message for a long time, feeling something cold and hard settle in my chest. Then I started to smile. It wasn't a pleasant smile. It was the kind of smile that had once made enemy combatants in the Middle East very, very nervous. They thought they were playing chess, moving pieces around the board while I wasn't looking. What they didn't realize was that I'd been watching the game all along, and I was about to flip the entire board. I scrolled through my contacts and found Jerry Kellerman, a lawyer friend from my Army days who specialized in employment law. If Danielle wanted to play games with my employment records, she was about to learn that some games have consequences. Jerry, it's Evan Rourke. I need to ask you about something interesting that just happened, and I think you're going to want to hear this. Jerry's office smelled like leather and bad coffee, but his smile when I finished explaining the situation was worth the trip across town. He leaned back in his chair, fingers steepled, looking like a predator who had just spotted wounded prey. Let me get this straight, he said. They retroactively put you on vacation to cancel your severance, but you never actually requested vacation time. Never. I have emails, calendar records, everything showing I was working right up until the layoff. And the sister-in-law works in HR at your wife's company, not yours. Different companies, but they're tight. Lila probably mentioned my situation, and Danielle made a call to her counterpart at Morrison. Jerry's grin widened. Evan, my friend, you need to go home and dig out your employment contract. All of it. Every page, every addendum, every piece of paper you signed when you started at Morrison. Why? Because if I remember correctly, Morrison Industries was one of those companies that got creative with their retention packages during the tech boom. They offered some very generous exit clauses to keep senior technical staff from jumping ship. I felt a spark of hope. What kind of exit clauses? The kind that pay out big when the company screws up. Go home, find that contract, and call me tonight. And Evan, don't mention this to anyone. Not even your wife. Especially not my wife, I thought, but I just nodded and headed home. The contract was buried in a filing cabinet in the basement, underneath tax returns and insurance policies I'd forgotten existed. 27 pages of legal language that had seemed like boring formalities when I'd signed them 8 years ago. I was on page 15 when I found it. Section 12.3, wrongful termination during protected leave. Should the employee be terminated during any period of company-approved leave, vacation, sick, personal, or family, and should said termination be later determined to be without cause, the employee shall be entitled to compensation equal to 10 times the standard severance package, plus legal fees and punitive damages. I read it 3 times to make sure I wasn't hallucinating. Then I called Jerry. You found it, didn't you? He said before I could speak. 10 times standard severance. Jerry, my standard package was $50,000. $500,000 plus legal fees. Evan, they didn't just shoot themselves in the foot. They blew off their entire leg. But they'll just say the vacation was legitimate, won't they? With what documentation? You said you never requested it. If they can't produce a legitimate vacation request with your signature, dated before your termination, then they've committed fraud. And fraud makes everything else they did look very, very suspicious to a jury. I felt that cold, hard thing in my chest start to warm up. What's our next move? We document everything, every email, every phone call, every interaction with Morrison's HR. Then we file a wrongful termination suit that's going to make their lawyers very unhappy. But first, we need to make sure your wife can't claim any of this money in a divorce. Divorce? The word came out sharper than I'd intended. Evan, you're about to come into a lot of money. If your marriage is already rocky, you need to protect yourself. $500,000 has a way of making people very friendly very quickly. I thought about Lila's suitcase, her new perfume, Brandon's name on her phone at 3 in the morning. What do I need to do? Nothing yet. Just don't tell her about the contract clause. And maybe start paying attention to where she goes and who she talks to. If she's planning to leave you anyway, it's better to know now than after the money comes through. After Jerry hung up, I sat in my basement workshop for a long time, thinking. Then, I drove to Marty's gym. The boxing club was exactly what it sounded like, a converted warehouse filled with heavy bags, speed bags, and the kind of equipment that had been built to last forever. The clientele was a mix of cops, firefighters, ex-military, and blue-collar workers who needed a place to blow off steam after dealing with the world's BS all day. Marty himself was behind the front desk, updating membership records on a computer that looked like it had survived the Clinton administration. He was a compact, weathered man in his 50s, with the kind of scars that came from asking questions people didn't want to answer. Evan, didn't expect to see you until tonight. Everything okay? I need to talk to you about something, privately. He led me to his office, a cramped space behind the gym that doubled as the headquarters for Kellerman Investigations. Marty had gotten his private investigator license 5 years ago, and the gym was perfect cover for meeting clients who needed discretion. I told him everything. Lila's mysterious work trip, the canceled severance, the contract clause, my growing suspicions about Brandon Cross. You want me to follow your wife? He said when I finished. I want to know what's really going on. If she's planning to leave me, I need to know before she finds out about the money. And if she's cheating? I thought about that for a moment. Then I want proof. Detailed, documented, court-admissible proof. Marty nodded slowly. My rate is $500 a day plus expenses. This kind of surveillance usually takes 3 to 5 days to get solid evidence. Do it. You sure? Sometimes it's better not to know. I looked around his office at the certificates on the wall and the photos of him with other veterans who'd managed to build something after the service ended. Marty, they tried to steal my severance. They think I'm just going to roll over and take it. I'm done being the nice guy who doesn't ask questions. All right then, I'll start tonight. Your wife's supposed to be in Portland, right? That's what she said. We'll see about that. I left the gym feeling lighter than I had in months. For the first time since my layoff, I had a plan. More than that, I had allies, Jerry with his legal expertise, and Marty with his talent for finding things people wanted to keep hidden. My phone buzzed with a text from Lila. Hotel is nice, long day of meetings ahead. Don't wait up. I typed back, I miss you, have fun. It was probably the last lie I'd tell her for a while. From now on, everything was going to be very, very honest. That evening, I drove to Vera's Tavern, a dive bar near the river where Morrison Industries employees like to drink after work. If Danielle had orchestrated my severance cancellation, someone might have heard something about it. Vera herself was a 60-something former schoolteacher who'd bought the bar after her divorce and turned it into the unofficial headquarters for workplace gossip in our part of town. She had a memory like a steel trap, and the kind of maternal instincts that made people confess things they'd never intended to share. Evan Rourke, she called out as I walked in. Haven't seen you in here for months. How's the job hunt going? Interesting developments, I said, sliding onto a bar stool. Can I get a beer and maybe some information? Beer I can do. Information depends on what you're looking for. I told her about the canceled severance, leaving out the details about the contract clause. I'm wondering if anyone from Morrison HR has been talking about policy changes. Vera's expression darkened. Janet Morrison was in here last week, crying into her martini about having to make some difficult calls on orders from above. Said she had to cancel severance packages for people who didn't deserve it, but her hands were tied. Orders from above? She got a call from someone at TechFlow Industries, some woman in HR who said there had been irregularities in your termination paperwork. Danielle. I felt that cold, hard thing in my chest start to burn. Did Janet say anything else? Just that she felt terrible about it, but TechFlow does a lot of business with Morrison. When they make suggestions, Morrison listens. I finished my beer and left Vera a $20 tip. Thanks, Vera. This helps a lot. Evan, whatever you're planning, be careful. People who play games with other people's livelihoods don't usually stop there. I nodded and headed home, my mind already working on the next phase of my plan. Danielle had made this personal when she decided to steal my severance. Now it was time to show her what happened when you picked a fight with someone who had nothing left to lose. My phone rang as I pulled into my driveway. Marty, your wife's not in Portland, he said without preamble. Where is she? The Westin downtown, here, with a guy who matches the description of Brandon Cross. They had dinner at the hotel restaurant, very cozy, lots of hand-holding. They're in room 1247 right now. I closed my eyes and felt the last piece of my old life crumble away. How long have you been watching? Since 6 p.m. They've been acting like a couple the whole time. I'm sorry, Evan. Don't be sorry, just document everything. Photos, times, whatever you can get without breaking any laws. Already on it. What's your next move? I looked at my house, our house, and thought about all the years I'd spent trying to make Lila happy, trying to be the husband she wanted, trying to ignore the growing distance between us. I'm going to let them think they're winning. Shit, I said, right up until the moment they realize they've lost everything. The TechFlow Industries building was all glass and steel, the kind of corporate monument that screamed, "We have money and we want you to know it." I'd been here exactly once before, for Lila's Christmas party 2 years ago, where I'd spent the evening making small talk with people who looked through me like I was furniture. Today was going to be different. Jerry met me in the parking garage, carrying a briefcase and wearing his best courtroom smile. You ready for this? More than ready. I straightened my tie, the good one, the one I'd worn to job interviews and funerals. You have everything we need? Employment contract, documentation of the fraudulent vacation entry, witness statements from Vera and Janet Morrison, and a very detailed letter of intent to sue for wrongful termination, plus your friend Marty's surveillance photos from last night. The photos. I'd seen them this morning, and they told the whole story. Lila and Brandon holding hands over dinner, kissing in the hotel lobby, disappearing into an elevator together. My wife of 10 years playing house with her corporate boyfriend while plotting to steal my severance money. Remember, Jerry said as we walked toward the elevators, let me do most of the talking. Your job is to look calm, confident, and completely unsurprised by everything that happens. The elevator ride to the 15th floor felt like ascending to a battlefield. When the doors opened, we were greeted by the kind of corporate luxury that probably cost more than most people's annual salaries. Marble floors, original art, and a reception desk that looked like it had been carved from a single piece of mahogany. We're here to see Danielle Hayes, Jerry told the receptionist, a young woman who looked like she'd stepped out of a fashion magazine. We don't have an appointment, but I think she'll want to see us. May I ask what this is regarding? Employment law, Jerry said with a smile that could have frozen champagne, specifically wrongful termination and fraud. The receptionist's perfectly applied makeup couldn't hide her sudden pallor. I'll see if Miss Hayes is available. She disappeared through a door marked Executive Offices, and I could hear muffled conversation, followed by what sounded like someone dropping a coffee mug. Mr. Rourke? The receptionist was back, looking like she'd rather be anywhere else. Ms. Hayes will see you now. Conference room 3. Conference room 3 was designed to intimidate. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city, a table that could seat 20, and enough technology to run a small country. Danielle Hayes sat at the head of the table, flanked by 2 men in expensive suits who had corporate lawyer written all over them. Danielle looked like an older, harder version of Lila. Same bone structure, same calculating eyes, but with an edge that came from years of climbing the corporate ladder in stilettos. She was beautiful in the way that predators are beautiful. Sleek, dangerous, and completely without mercy. Evan, she said, not bothering to stand, this is unexpected. I thought you'd be busy looking for work. I've been busy, I said, taking a seat across from her. Just not looking for work. Jerry placed his briefcase on the table and opened it with theatrical precision. Ms. Hayes, my name is Jerome Kellerman, and I represent Mr. Rourke in matters relating to his recent termination from Morrison Industries. I'm not sure why you're here, Danielle said smoothly. Mr. Rourke wasn't employed by TechFlow? No, but you made a phone call to Morrison Industries HR on March 15th, didn't you? A call in which you suggested that Mr. Rourke's termination paperwork contained irregularities. Danielle's lawyers exchanged glances. One of them, a thin man with wire-rimmed glasses, leaned forward. We're not going to discuss confidential business communications. Of course not, Jerry said. But you might want to discuss the fact that those communications led to the fraudulent alteration of employment records and the theft of Mr. Rourke's rightful severance package. He pulled out a folder and spread its contents across the table. Copies of my employment contract, the vacation entry that had appeared in my file, and a timeline showing exactly when each change had been made. This is Mr. Rourke's original employment contract with Morrison Industries, Jerry continued. Section 12.3 is particularly interesting. Would you like me to read it aloud? Danielle's face had gone very still. That won't be necessary. I think it is necessary. Jerry's voice carried the authority of someone who'd spent years making juries listen to uncomfortable truths. Section 12.3 states that any employee terminated during company-approved leave is entitled to 10 times the standard severance package if the termination is later determined to be without cause. The thin lawyer was frantically scribbling notes. The other one looked like he was calculating how much this was going to cost. Mr. Rourke's standard severance was $50,000, Jerry continued, which means your little phone call just cost someone $500,000 plus legal fees and punitive damages. You can't prove we had anything to do with Morrison's internal decisions, Danielle said, but her voice lacked its earlier confidence. Actually, we can. Jerry pulled out another folder. We have witness testimony from Janet Morrison herself, confirming that she received a call from TechFlow HR requesting the alteration of Mr. Rourke's records. We also have documentation showing that the vacation entry was added to his file 3 days after his termination, which incidentally constitutes fraud. I watched Danielle's face as the implication sank in. She was smart enough to know that this wasn't just about money anymore. Fraud charges could destroy her career and possibly land her in prison. What do you want? She asked finally. Full reinstatement of Mr. Rourke's severance package, plus the additional compensation specified in his contract. A written apology from both TechFlow and Morrison Industries, and your assurance that there will be no further interference in Mr. Rourke's employment prospects. And if we refuse, Jerry's smile could have cut glass. Then we file suit in federal court for conspiracy to commit fraud, interference with contractual relations, and civil rights violations. The media loves stories about big corporations stealing from laid-off workers. I imagine the publicity would be extensive. The room fell silent, except for the sound of the thin lawyer's pen scratching across his legal pad. Danielle stared at me across the table, and I could see her trying to figure out how her simple plan to help her sister had turned into a corporate nightmare. We'll need time to discuss this with our client, the other lawyer said. Of course, Jerry said, closing his briefcase. You have until close of business today. After that, we file suit. We stood to leave, but I paused at the door. Oh, Danielle, tell Lila I said hello. I'm sure she'll be very interested to hear about today's meeting. The elevator ride down was silent until we reached the parking garage. Then Jerry started laughing. Jesus, Evan, I haven't had that much fun in a courtroom in years. Did you see her face when I mentioned the fraud charges? Think they'll pay? They don't have a choice. Fighting this in court would cost them more than settling, and the publicity would be a disaster. You'll have your money within a week. I felt a surge of satisfaction, but it was tempered by the knowledge that this was only the first phase of my plan. Danielle and Lila had tried to steal my future. Now it was time to return the favor. Jerry, I need to ask you about something else. If I were to file for divorce, what would happen to the settlement money? Depends on the circumstances. If you can prove adultery, most judges would consider the money separate property, especially since it's compensation for damages caused by your wife's family member. And if I had proof of the adultery, then your wife wouldn't get a dime. I thought about Marty's photographs, safely stored in his office safe. Good to know. My phone buzzed with a text from Lila. Missing you. Can't wait to get home tomorrow. I stared at the message for a long moment, then deleted it without responding. She'd be home tomorrow, all right. But the home she'd be coming back to was going to be very different from the one she'd left. The game was just getting started. Lila came home from her business trip, glowing with the kind of satisfaction that comes from getting away with something. She breezed through the door at 6 p.m., designer luggage in tow, and actually kissed my cheek before heading upstairs to unpack. How was Portland? I asked, following her to the bedroom. Productive. Very productive. She was humming as she hung up her clothes, including that red dress, which now carried the faint scent of expensive cologne that definitely wasn't mine. Danielle and I made some real progress on the merger consultation. That's great. I'm sure you two worked very closely together. She paused, a silk blouse half folded in her hands. What's that supposed to mean? Nothing, just that you and Danielle make a good team when you put your minds to something. The blouse went into the dresser with more force than necessary. Evan, if you have something to say, just say it. Actually, I do have something to say. I had an interesting meeting today. Job interview? Not exactly. I sat down on the bed, watching her face carefully. I met with a lawyer about my canceled severance. Her hand stilled. What lawyer? Jerry Kellerman. Remember him? He was at our wedding. Evan, you can't afford a lawyer right now. We need to be practical about money. That's the funny thing about employment lawyers. They work on contingency. Jerry thinks I have a very strong case for wrongful termination. Lila turned to face me fully, and I could see her mind working behind her eyes. What kind of case? The kind that pays out $500,000 when companies commit fraud to steal severance packages. The color drained from her face so quickly I thought she might faint. $500,000? Turns out Morrison Industries made a mistake when they canceled my severance. A very expensive mistake. I stood up, enjoying the way she took an involuntary step backward. Jerry filed the paperwork this afternoon. We should have a settlement within the week. That's wonderful, Evan. We can pay off the mortgage, maybe take a real vacation. We? I let the word hang in the air between us. Lila, there is no we anymore. What are you talking about? I pulled out my phone and showed her one of Marty's photographs. Her and Brandon, hands intertwined across a candlelit table. Portland looks different than I remembered. She stared at the photo for a long moment, and I watched her face cycle through surprise, fear, and finally defiance. How long have you been having me followed? Long enough. The question is, how long have you been seeing Brandon Cross? The slap came fast and hard, snapping my head to the side. For a moment we stood there in shocked silence, her hand still raised, my cheek burning. Feel better? I asked. You bastard! You self-righteous, paranoid bastard. I'm paranoid? Lila, you've been planning this for months. The canceled severance was just supposed to be the cherry on top, wasn't it? Leave me broke and desperate while you rode off into the sunset with your corporate boyfriend. It wasn't supposed to happen like this. How was it supposed to happen? Were you going to ask for a divorce before or after you stole my money? She sank onto the bed, her defiance crumbling. I didn't know about the contract clause. Danielle just we thought it would be easier if you didn't have a lot of money to fight with. Easier for who? For everyone. Evan, we haven't been happy for years, you know that. So you decided to make me miserable instead of just asking for a divorce? I was going to ask after things were settled, after you'd stolen everything I had left. She looked up at me, and for a moment, I saw a flash of the woman I'd married. Vulnerable, uncertain, almost human. Then it was gone, replaced by the corporate shark I'd been living with for the past few years. What do you want, Evan? I want you out, tonight. This is my house, too. Not anymore. Jerry's filing divorce papers tomorrow morning. Adultery is still grounds for fault-based divorce in this state, and I have enough evidence to bury you in court. You can't prove anything. I scrolled through my phone and showed her another photo. This one of her and Brandon kissing in the hotel lobby. Marty's very thorough. We have 3 days worth of documentation. She stared at the photos, her hand shaking slightly. The money, what about it? I'm entitled to half of everything we earned during the marriage. Everything we earned, yes. But this isn't marital income, indeed. It's compensation for damages caused by your sister's fraud. Damages that wouldn't have existed if you hadn't been planning to leave me for Brandon. You can't keep all of it. Watch me. I left her sitting on the bed and went downstairs to pour myself a drink. Scotch seemed appropriate for the occasion. Something with enough burn to match the satisfaction I was feeling. My phone rang. Danielle. Evan, we need to talk. I think we said everything we needed to say this morning. This is about Lila. What about her? She called me crying. She says you're throwing her out. I'm divorcing her. There's a difference. Evan, please, I know you're angry, but Lila made a mistake. People make mistakes. Danielle, your sister has been seeing Brandon Cross for months while plotting to steal my severance money. That's not a mistake. That's a conspiracy. The severance thing was my idea, not hers. And that makes it better how? Silence on the other end of the line. Then, what do you want? I want you to stay out of my life, both of you. I want you to tell Brandon that if he comes within 100 yards of me or my property, I'll have him arrested for trespassing. And I want you to remember that the next time you decide to play games with someone's livelihood, You might want to make sure they don't have friends who know how to fight back. Evan, we're done here, Danielle. You and Lila made your choices. Now you get to live with the consequences. I hung up and finished my scotch. Upstairs, I could hear Lila moving around, presumably packing, again. This time, she wouldn't be coming back. My phone buzzed with a text from Marty. Heard through the grapevine that Brandon's been asking questions about you. Might want to watch your back. I typed back with, let him ask. I've got nothing to hide anymore. For the first time in months, that was absolutely true. Brandon Cross was exactly what I'd expected. 6'2", gym-built, with the kind of artificially white smile that came from expensive dental work, and the confidence that came from never being told no by anyone who mattered. He was waiting by my car when I came out of Jerry's office the next morning, leaning against his BMW like he owned the parking lot. Evan Rourke? His voice had that practiced smoothness of someone who'd spent years in sales. I think we need to talk. I don't think we do. I clicked my key fob, and my car chirped in response. You're in my way. Look, I know this is awkward, but we're both adults here. We should be able to work this out like civilized people. I stopped and really looked at him for the first time. Designer suit, expensive watch, shoes that probably cost more than most people's rent. Everything about him screamed money and privilege, from his perfect hair to his manicured nails. Civilized, I repeated. Is that what you call sleeping with another man's wife? His smile faltered slightly. Lila told me your marriage was over. She said you two were just waiting for the right time to make it official. And you believed her? Why wouldn't I? Because if that were true, she wouldn't have needed to lie about where she was going or who she was with. Because if that were true, she wouldn't have had her sister try to steal my severance money to make sure I couldn't fight the divorce. Brandon's face went through several expressions in quick succession: confusion, realization, and finally, anger. What are you talking about? You didn't know? I almost felt sorry for him, almost. Brandon, you've been played. Lila and Danielle cooked up a plan to cancel my severance so I'd be broke when she filed for divorce. The idea was that I'd be so desperate I'd agree to anything just to get it over with. That's impossible, is it? When did Lila first mention that she was thinking about leaving me? About 6 months ago, when I started at TechFlow. And when did she first suggest that you two should be together? A few weeks after that, but she said she needed time to figure out how to handle the divorce without destroying you financially. I laughed, and it wasn't a pleasant sound. Brandon, she wasn't trying to protect me. She was trying to protect herself. If I had money, I could hire a good lawyer and fight for half of everything. If I was broke, I'd have to take whatever she offered. You're lying. Am I? Ask her about the phone call Danielle made to Morrison Industries. Ask her about the vacation time that mysteriously appeared in my employment file 3 days after I was fired. Ask her why she told you she was in Portland when she was actually at the Westin downtown. Brandon's perfect composure was starting to crack. How do you know about Portland? Because I had her followed. I have photos, Brandon, lots of them. You two holding hands, kissing, disappearing into hotel rooms together. Very romantic. You son of a witch. I'm the son of a witch? You're sleeping with my wife and I'm the problem? He stepped closer and I could see the violence building behind his eyes. You have no idea who you're dealing with. Actually, I do. You're Brandon Cross, age 42, graduated from state with a business degree and mediocre grades. You played football for 2 years until you blew out your knee. You've been married twice, both times to women who divorced you for cheating. You drive a leased BMW, live in a rented condo, and despite your expensive clothes and fancy watch, you're actually about 6 months away from bankruptcy. The color drained from his face. How do you... I have friends who are very good at finding information. Did you really think I was going to let you and Lila destroy my life without learning everything I could about both of you? What do you want? I want you to stay away from my wife. She's not your wife anymore. She's still legally married to me until the divorce is final. And when it is final, she's not going to have the money you think she is. What are you talking about? The severance settlement. $500,000. Lila thought she was going to get half of it in the divorce. But she was wrong. It's compensation for damages caused by her sister's fraud. She won't see a penny. Brandon stared at me for a long moment, and I could practically see the calculations running through his head. He'd thought he was trading up, dumping his financial problems for a rich divorcee with $500,000. Instead, he was getting a woman with no money and a reputation for sleeping with other people's husbands. "This isn't over," he said finally. "Yes, it is. Brandon, let me give you some free advice. Find another job, find another city, and find another woman. Because if you stay here and keep pursuing my soon-to-be ex-wife, I'm going to make your life very, very unpleasant." Is that a threat? It's a promise. He got into his BMW and drove away, but not before giving me a look that promised this conversation wasn't finished. I wasn't worried. Men like Brandon were bullies, and bullies folded when someone finally stood up to them. My phone rang as I was driving home. Lila. "Evan, Brandon said you threatened him." I gave him some career advice. There's a difference. This has to stop. You're being vindictive. I'm being practical. "Lila, you and your sister tried to steal my severance money. You've been cheating on me for months. You lied about where you were going and who you were with. And now you're upset because I'm not rolling over and taking it quietly? I never meant for it to go this far." "What did you mean?" Silence on the other end of the line. Then, "I just wanted out, Evan. I wanted out of this marriage, out of this life, out of everything. I felt trapped." "So you decided to trap me instead?" "I made mistakes, I know that, but destroying Brandon's career isn't going to fix anything. I'm not destroying his career. I'm just making sure that he understands the consequences of his choices." "What consequences?" "Ask him. I'm sure he'll explain it to you." I hung up and drove to Vera's tavern. I needed a drink, and I needed to be around people who understood that sometimes the only way to deal with bullies was to hit back harder than they hit you. The bar was crowded for a Thursday afternoon, filled with the usual mix of blue-collar workers and office refugees looking to forget their troubles in alcohol and conversation. Vera was behind the bar, polishing glasses with the kind of methodical precision that came from 40 years of practice. "Evan, heard you had some excitement today." "News travels fast." "Small town, honey. Word is you're about to come into some serious money." "Word is correct." "And your wife?" "Soon to be ex-wife." Vera nodded approvingly. "Good for you. Life's too short to spend it with people who don't appreciate what they have." I ordered a beer and found a seat at the bar, listening to the familiar sounds of working people unwinding after a long day. This was my world. Honest, straightforward, unpretentious. Lila had always looked down on places like this, on people like this. She'd wanted something shinier, more sophisticated. Well, now she had it. I hoped it made her happy. My phone buzzed with a text from Jerry. "Settlement approved. Money will be in your account Monday morning." Congratulations. $500,000. More money than I'd ever imagined having. Enough to buy a new house, a new car, a new life. Enough to start over completely. The thought should have made me happy. But instead, I felt empty. 10 years of marriage gone. A woman I'd loved or thought I'd loved, revealed as someone I'd never really known. A future I'd planned for, erased. "You look like a man with something on his mind," Vera said, refilling my beer without being asked. "Just thinking about what comes next." "What do you want to come next?" That was the question, wasn't it? What did I want? For months, I'd been focused on survival. Finding a job, saving my marriage, holding on to what I had. Now, suddenly, I had options. "I want to build something," I said finally. "Something that can't be taken away by people who think they're smarter than me." Sounds like a plan. My phone rang. Marty. "Evan, we might have a problem. Brandon's been making calls, asking questions about you. He's also been talking to some people who might not have your best interests at heart." "What kind of people?" "The kind who solve problems for money. Nothing serious yet, but you might want to watch yourself for a while." I felt a familiar coldness settle in my chest. How serious is nothing serious? Probably just intimidation, but maybe stay away from dark parking lots for a few days. Copy that. I finished my beer and headed home, my mind already working on contingencies. Brandon was escalating, which meant he was desperate. Desperate people did stupid things, and stupid things had consequences. It was time to show Brandon Cross what consequences looked like. The package arrived at Brandon's office on Monday morning, delivered by a courier service that specialized in discreet deliveries for law firms and private investigators. Inside was a manila envelope containing copies of every financial document Marty had been able to dig up. Credit reports, bank statements, court records from his previous divorces, and a detailed breakdown of his current debts. Attached was a simple note. "Thought you should know what Lila's getting into, a concerned friend." The package for Lila was delivered to her office at the same time. It contained copies of Brandon's financial records, along with a few additional items Marty had uncovered, photos of Brandon with other women taken over the past 6 months, and a copy of his dating profile on an expensive matchmaking service, which listed his status as single and his net worth as 7 figures. The note with her package read, "Thought you should know what you're getting into. Same concerned friend." I was having coffee at a cafe across the street from TechFlow Industries when Lila came storming out of the building, her phone pressed to her ear and her face flushed with anger. Even from a distance, I could see that she was furious. My phone rang 5 minutes later. "You bastard," she said without preamble. "Good morning to you too, Leela. What did you send me?" "Information. I thought you had a right to know who you're planning to spend your life with." "These documents are private. How did you get them?" "The same way you got access to my employment records. The difference is, everything I sent you is public information. Court records, credit reports, business filings, all perfectly legal to obtain. Brandon's financial problems are none of your business." "You're right, but they're definitely your business, aren't they? Especially since you were counting on my settlement money to solve them." Silence on the other end of the line. Then, "What settlement money?" "The $500,000 Morrison Industries is paying me for wrongful termination. The money you thought you were going to get half of in the divorce." What do you mean, thought?" "Lila, adultery is still grounds for fault-based divorce in this state. When you cheat on your spouse, you forfeit your right to marital property. You're not getting a dime. That's not true. Ask your lawyer. Better yet, ask Danielle. I'm sure she'll explain how community property laws work when one spouse commits fraud to benefit the other spouse's adultery." I could hear her breathing heavily, and I knew she was finally beginning to understand the scope of what she'd lost. "Evan, please. We can work this out. We don't have to destroy each other." "Lila, you tried to destroy me first. You just weren't very good at it." "I made mistakes. You made choices. You chose to cheat. You chose to lie. You chose to have your sister steal my severance. Now you get to live with the consequences." "What about Brandon?" "What about him?" "He's threatening to sue you for harassment." I laughed. "Let him try. Everything I sent was public record, obtained through perfectly legal means. If he wants to explain to a judge why he's upset about the people knowing his financial situation, I'm sure that will go well for him. Evan, Lila, we're done. The divorce papers will be filed tomorrow. You can contest it if you want, but I have enough evidence of your adultery to bury you in court. Your best bet is to sign the papers and move on with your life. And if I don't, then I release everything to the press. Corporate executive and her sister conspire to defraud laid-off worker, while executive carries on affair with bankrupt consultant. I'm sure the business journals would love that story." She hung up without another word. My phone rang again immediately. This time it was Brandon, and he sounded like a man on the edge of a complete breakdown. "You son of a witch, what did you do?" I shared some information, public information. My private financial records are not public information. Court records are. Credit reports can be obtained by anyone with a legitimate business interest. Business filings are public record. Everything I sent was completely legal to obtain and distribute. Lila's threatening to leave me. "Smart woman, you should have been honest with her from the beginning. I was going to pay off my debts with her divorce settlement." "What divorce settlement?" "Brandon, Lila's not getting anything in the divorce. She committed adultery. In this state, that means she forfeits her right to marital property." "That's impossible. Ask your lawyer." "Oh, wait, you can't afford a lawyer, can you?" The line went quiet for a long moment. When Brandon spoke again, his voice was deadly calm. "You think you're very clever, don't you?" "I think I'm very thorough. This isn't over." "Yes, it is. Brandon, you have two choices. You can accept that you lost and move on with your life, or you can keep fighting and lose even more. But either way, you're done with Lila, and you're done with me. We'll see about that." He hung up, and I felt a familiar tingle of anticipation. Brandon was about to do something stupid, and when he did, I'd be ready. I didn't have to wait long. That evening, I was leaving Marty's gym when I noticed Brandon's BMW following me. He stayed back, probably thinking he was being subtle, but after 2 tours in the Middle East, I could spot a tail from half a mile away. I led him on a leisurely drive through downtown, taking my time, letting him think he was in control. Then I pulled into the parking lot of the police station and sat there, engine running, waiting. Brandon drove past twice before finally pulling in behind me. I got out of my car and walked back to his BMW, tapping on the driver's side window. He rolled it down, his face flushed with anger and embarrassment. Following people is illegal, Brandon. It's called stalking. I wasn't following you. Then what are you doing in the police station parking lot? I was just driving around and coincidentally ending up everywhere I go. That's an interesting coincidence. I pulled out my phone and showed him the screen. I'd been recording our conversation since he'd rolled down his window. Here's what's going to happen, I said. You're going to drive home, pack your things, and leave town. Tonight. If I see you again, if you contact Lila again, if you so much as drive down my street again, I'm filing stalking charges and releasing everything I know about you to every business journal and gossip blog in the state. You can't prove I was following you. I don't have to prove it. I just have to make the accusation. And given your financial situation and your history of poor decision-making, who do you think people are going to believe? He stared at me for a long moment, and I could see the fight go out of him. He was broke. His reputation was in ruins, and the woman he'd thought was his ticket to financial security had just discovered he was a fraud. This isn't fair, he said finally. Fair? I leaned closer to his window. Brandon, you slept with my wife, helped steal my severance money, and then threatened me when I fought back. You want to talk about fair? He didn't answer. He just rolled up his window and drove away. I never saw him again. The divorce was finalized 6 weeks later. Lila didn't contest it. Her lawyer had explained that fighting would only make things worse for her. She got nothing except the clothes in her closet and her car, which was repossessed 2 months later when she couldn't make the payments. Danielle was fired from TechFlow Industries after an internal investigation revealed her role in the Morrison Industries fraud. She moved back in with her parents and took a job as a receptionist at a small accounting firm. As for me, I used part of the settlement money to buy Marty's gym when he decided to focus full-time on his investigation business. The other part went into a trust fund that would ensure I never had to worry about money again. I kept the house, our house, now just my house, and turned Lila's walk-in closet into a home office. Sometimes, when I'm working late, I think about the red dress she packed for her fake business trip, and I smile. 6 months after the divorce, I was having a beer at Vera's when she slid a newspaper across the bar. The business section had a small item about TechFlow Industries settling a lawsuit with a former employee for wrongful termination. The settlement amount wasn't disclosed, but the article mentioned that it was substantial. Heard Lila's working at a call center now, Vera said casually. Is that right? Yep, minimum wage, no benefits. Danielle's working there too, in the same department. I nodded and finished my beer. Thanks for the update. You know what the funny thing is? Vera continued. They both could have avoided all of this if they'd just left you alone. If Lila had asked for a divorce like a normal person, she probably would have gotten half of everything. Instead, she got greedy. Greed will do that to you. Yes, it will. I left Vera a generous tip and walked home through the downtown streets I'd grown up on. The evening was warm, and the city felt alive with possibilities. Tomorrow, I'd open the gym early and start training a new group of young fighters who reminded me of myself at their age. Hungry, determined, and ready to fight for what they wanted. Tonight, though, I was content to walk slowly and think about how sometimes, when people try to destroy you, they end up giving you exactly what you need to build something better. The exit clause had paid in full, just like the contract promised. But more than that, it had taught me something valuable about the difference between being nice and being smart, between being a victim and being a survivor. Lila and Danielle had thought they were playing chess, moving pieces around the board while I wasn't looking. What they'd failed to realize was that I'd been watching the game all along, and I was much better at it than they were. Some lessons are expensive, some are cheap. The lesson about not trying to steal from people who have nothing left to lose, that one cost them everything,